Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jordan Kearns. We're back with more Overwatch 2 content. With that being said, what we have for you today is the best crosshairs for each character in Overwatch 2. Now, if you enjoy this content, hit that like, hit that subscribe button to let me and the team know you want to see more content like this. With that being said, let's go on into it. So, starting off, what you're going to want to do is go to Diva. You're going to set it to crosshair length of 10, center gap of 7. You're going to want to turn your dot size down to 0, and then you're going to want to turn your show accuracy to off. And again, cyan is what I think is best for the human eye to detect. So you can do that. Now, if you want to mess with the rotation, you can, but I like to leave it at 0. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead, hop into the next champion, which should be Doomfist. Okay, so for Doomfist, you're going to set this to dot. And you're going to set your color to cyan. You're going to come down to your dot type. Now this is where you're going to want to set your dot to 6.5. Okay. And this is what your crosshair should end up looking like. Now you're going to want scale with resolution on, and you're going to want dot opacity on. Alright. Let's move on to the next one. So, come over here, Junker Queen. Select change hero. Now you're going to come down. Make sure it's on crosshairs. Now you're going to do show accuracy off, cyan for the color. You can also do green and magenta if you want to. Those are other good substitutes. Now, I also find people love the color yellow. So, hey, do what you think's best for you. Now, crosshair length. We're going to want to set this to 10. Okay, you're going to set center gap to 0. And come down to your dot. Make sure it is at 0. Okay, with that being said, leave everything else on 1 and make sure it's on scale with resolution. So now we are on Malga. You're going to want to make sure it's on crosshairs. Set it to off. Cyan again. Now, we're really going to be focusing on these. Now, you're going to want center crosshair length to 17, and then set your center gap to 3. Okay. Now, with everything else, keep your dot size on 0, scale with resolution. If you want, I like to leave outline opacity at 100. Okay, next up, we have Orisa. So, same thing. You're going to want to make sure it's on crosshairs, cyan. Now, again, what we're going to be focusing on these right here. So make sure crosshair length is on 10, center gap is on 0.5, and you're going to end up looking or having a crosshair that looks like this. Now, that is going to be your crosshair for Orisa. Okay, so next up, we are on Ramattra. Now, with Ramattra, what you're going to want to do is set your crosshairs to... Crazy. You're going to want to set your crosshairs, or set your type to crosshair. Make sure it's on cyan. I love keeping show accuracy off. It allows you to be more precise. Now, again, we're going to just keep on focusing here. So, 10 and 10. Now, leave everything else the same. Now, that's your crosshairs for Ramattra. Next up, we have Reinhardt. Okay, for Reinhardt, leave it on crosshairs, and then we're going to come down and focus on these. So make sure crosshair length is on 10, and center gap is on 7. Okay, leave everything else the same, and there's your crosshairs for Reinhardt. Now, for Roadhog, you're going to go to type, set it for dot, and then come down to advanced. You're going to want to leave it on cyan, outline on black, and then come down to your dot size and set it on 8. And that is what your crosshair is going to look like, or this is what your reticle is going to look like on Roadhog. Now you come back over to change hero. We're going to move on to Sigma. Okay, so start off, make sure your type is set at crosshairs. Leave everything else the same. You're going to come down to here, set it to 10 for crosshair and length, and then move it to 7. So a lot of these you're going to see for the tanks are going to be on these higher ends with 10, and then you're going to see a drop down for the DPSs. Okay, now that is your crosshair for Sigma. Next on, we're going to move over to Winston. Okay, for crosshairs for Winston, what you're going to have is set it to crosshair. You're going to come back over to your crosshair length, and you're going to set it to 10, and your center gap to 10. That being said, everything else is going to be the same, and those are your crosshairs for Winston. If any of y'all are Wrecking Ball mains, don't be in my lobbies, please. Same with the Doomfist. Okay, so we're going to leave this on crosshairs. Come over, leave everything else the same, and you're going to set crosshair length to 8 and center gap to 0. Now, you're going to end up having a crosshair that looks like that on Wrecking Ball. For Zarya, what you're going to want to do is set this. You can really set this to whatever you want. You can leave it as a default. You can leave it as circle. But what I have found to be the best is to leave it on crosshairs. So, again, choose what you think is best. But we're going to come down crosshair length to 10. And this is just my professional opinion on what you should be setting your crosshairs for. Okay, now set center gap to 7. And you're going to end up having a crosshair that looks like this on Zarya. Okay, now we're swapping over to the DPS. Okay, so next up, we have Ashe. You're going to want Ashe. Most of your DPS are going to be basically what you see here. So we're going to have, for Ashe, crosshair and length is going to be 7, center gap is going to be 0, and you're going to end up having a crosshair that looks like that. Pretty much leave everything else the same. Okay, now we're going to swap over to Bastion. For Bastion, what we're going to do is, again, we're going to leave it on crosshair. Drop over here to crosshair length. We're going to leave it on, put it on 7, and center gap to 3. And this is going to be your crosshair for Bastion. Okay, so for next up, we're going to do Cassidy. So, again, you're going to leave it on crosshairs. And for all your DPS, you're going to be working in mainly these crosshair length and center gaps. So, crosshair and length, you're going to want to add a 5, and then rest, and center gap being 0. And that is your crosshairs for Cassidy. Now, for Echo, you're going to want to set it to crosshairs. And again, come down to your crosshair length. You're going to want to set it to 5, and you're going to want to set your center gap to 5. Now, this is what your crosshair is going to look like for Echo. Okay, now swap over to Genji. And what we're going to do here is leave it on crosshairs. Come down to crosshair and length. It's going to be 7 and 7. Okay, now this is what your crosshair length is going to, or crosshairs are going to look like for Genji. For Hanzo, you're going to put it on dot. Okay, so you put it on dot, and then you're going to come down to dot size and set that to 4. And this is what your reticle is going to look like for Hanzo. Okay, next up we have Junkrat crosshairs. So, what you're going to do, set Junkrat crosshairs for, well, you're going to set it on crosshairs, and then you're going to come down and set it to 7 and 5. Okay, and those are the crosshairs for Junkrat. So for Mei, what we're going to do here is we're going to set this on crosshairs. We're going to come over, set this on 5 and 7. Now again, leave everything else the same. And this is going to be your crosshair for Mei. So Pharah, you're going to come over and set it to dot. Then you're going to come over down to, or come down to dot size and set it to 5. All right. And this is going to be your reticle for Pharah. Okay. For Reaper, what you're going to want to do is set this to crosshairs. Come down to your crosshair length and set it to 7. And then you're going to set the center gap to 7. And this is what your reticle is going to look like for Reaper. So for Sojourn, set it to crosshairs. You're going to come down to crosshair length, set it on 7, and the center gap being 0. Okay. Now this is what your crosshair is going to look like for Sojourn. Next up, we move on to Soldier. Set it to crosshairs. Then you're going to move down and set it to crosshair length to 6 and 3.5 for center gap. And this is going to be your crosshair for Soldier 76. Okay. So next up we have Sombra. So Sombra, you're going to set it to crosshairs. Then you're going to move down to crosshair length. That being, make sure to hit enter if you're playing on PC. Now, that 6 for crosshair length and 3. Okay. Okay, you're going to set it to 3 and 6. Leave everything else the same. So this is going to be your crosshair for Sombra. So for Symmetra, what you're going to want to do, set it to crosshairs. Come down to your crosshair length. Hit it for 3 for crosshair length. And then move it to 9 for center gap. This is what your crosshair is going to look like on Symmetra. Okay. For Torb, set Torb to dot. And then you're going to come down to dot size and set it to 5. This is going to be your crosshair for Torb. For Tracer, what we have is you're going to set it to crosshairs. Then you're going to move down to crosshair length, set it to 6, and then set this to 3. Now again, you're going to see a lot of repeating patterns here. Okay. So this is going to be your crosshair length for Tracer. So Venture, you're going to set to dot, and you're going to set dot size to 5. Now this is what your reticle is going to look like on Venture. Next up, we have Widow. So Widow, you're going to set to crosshairs. You're going to move down to crosshair length, set it to 7, and then set this to 0. And that is what your crosshair is going to look like. And this is the best crosshair length. And this is the best crosshair for Widow in Overwatch 2. And this is the best crosshair for Widow in Overwatch 2. So next up, we're going to move to Ana. Come down to your crosshair length and center gap. You're going to set this to 4.5 and then set center gap to 2. And this is the best crosshair for Ana in Overwatch 2. Okay, for Baptiste, you're going to set it to crosshairs. Come on down to crosshair length. You're going to set that to 3. And then you're going to move over and set center gap to 9. And this is the best crosshair for Baptiste in Overwatch 2. Now we're going to move over to Brig. And this is going to be... Okay. So you're going to come over here, set crosshair length 3.5. And then you're going to set center gap to 10. And this is the best crosshair for Brig in Overwatch 2. Next up, we have Alari. Now set this to crosshairs. You're going to move on down, go to crosshair length, set it to 4, and then set your center gap to 3. And this is the best, and this is the best crosshair for Alari in Overwatch 2. Okay, so for Juno, what you're going to want to do is basically come over here. You're going to set crosshair length to 6, and then you're going to set center gap to 0. And this is what your crosshair is going to look like on Juno. And this is the best crosshair for Juno in Overwatch 2. For Kiriko, what you're going to do is set it to crosshairs. You're going to come over, set crosshair length to 3.5, and then set center gap to 3. Okay. That being said, this is the best Kiriko crosshair in Overwatch 2. Okay, next up we have Life Weaver. Lifeweaver, you're going to set to crosshairs. Come down, set to 5 for crosshair length, and for center gap, set it to 3 point. You're going to set it to 3. You're going to set crosshair length to 3. You're going to set crosshair length to 5 and set center gap to 3. Now this is the best crosshair. Okay. For Lifeweaver, what you're going to want to do is set crosshair length to 5 and set center gap to 3. Now this is the best crosshairs for Lifeweaver in Overwatch 2. Okay, next up, we have the fun-loving beat maker himself, Lucio. So, what you're going to do is come down, set it to 3.5 for crosshair length, and set center gap to 10. Now, this is the best Lucio crosshair in Overwatch 2. So, for Mercy, set it to crosshairs. You're going to move it down to, you're going to move down and go crosshair length of 7, and then crosshair or center gap of 3. And this is what your crosshair is going to look like on Mercy. This is the best crosshair in Overwatch 2 for Mercy. Okay, for Moira, you're going to want to set it to crosshairs. You're going to come down, set this to 7, then you're going to set center gap to 0. And this is what your crosshair is going to look like on Moira. And this is the best. And this is the best crosshair on Moira in Overwatch 2. Okay, here we have Zen. You're going to set it to crosshairs. Then you're going to come down, set crosshair length to 6, and then set center gap to 8. And this is the best crosshair for Zen in Overwatch 2.